For progressive Democrats as a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning from stormy Oklahoma. It is such a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to have with us a special guest today, Madeline Ryan Smith from Georgia. She is such an awesome representative from the Democratic Party that we are just excited. And I'm really kind of raising my voice today. I'm really shouting it out in homage to Robin Williams and his rendition of Good Morning Vietnam. I just love that movie and that homage and that little musical number that we had coming in here that was playing in the background. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's such a great day to be here with everybody to be on. So thank you for joining in. So there's a couple of housekeeping things that we need to talk just a little bit about. But before we get to that, let's introduce our special guest for today. She's a great friend. She's a great advocate for the Democratic Party. She's a tremendous advocate for people with disabilities. Let's welcome Madeline Ryan Smith. Madeline, good morning.
Hey, everybody. How are you guys doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for joining us. It's such a, I keep saying over and over again, it's such a pleasure to have met you and have been able to spend a few months getting to know you. And there's nothing but positive things that I have to say about you and how much, how important you are and how important you've become to those of us who follow you. So good morning and thanks for joining with us today.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I need to tone down my rhetoric a little bit. I understand that was a little bit that was a little bit over the
Oh
top.
no, absolutely. I love the energy. I love the energy. And to your point with film and music and all these things and tying them to current events, it is May the 4th. So May the 4th be with you. And
Exactly.
Carrie Fisher is getting her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame today. And
Posthumously.
that is very in keeping with our resistance. So I am very excited for her.
Awesome.
God rest her soul, of course.
Right.
But we are huge Star Wars fans in my household. So it's a very exciting day for us.
Well, and I have been a lifelong learner of Star Wars for 44 years. Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. I went to the premiere in Manhattan, Kansas, in Aggieville. I was up there for a swimming tournament, and we went to a premiere in Manhattan, Kansas of Star Wars when it first was brought out in 1977, I believe it was. Yeah, I was up there at the state swimming championships. And I do have to say one thing though. I've got a person on here this morning that we're gonna give her a hard time because she just called me an old man, and I don't know whether I'd appreciate that or shoot back at her. But Sam, yeah, this was
it wasn't me.
Yeah, sure it wasn't. So anyway, thanks anyway for everybody being on here. So now to our housekeeping announcement. For those people who are listening in, we've got quite a slate on our itinerary today. Whoop, we just had a big old lightning strike right here close by. I don't know if you guys heard that or not. Wow. We are in the middle of a thunderstorm and it feels like we are, it's getting intense here in Norman. They're telling us today that we're going to have a possibility of tornadoes, and we don't need any more of those. We've already had one that struck Oklahoma in April, and we had just a few weeks ago, we had a rash of them went through coal and an individual was killed, and we don't need any more of that in Oklahoma. But for those of us that are in Oklahoma, it's time to buckle up and pull up our bootstraps because we're in for a good one today. So getting back to our listeners, if you have questions that you want to ask, we may not be able to get you on live to ask that question, but if you would, please put your questions down below. Put it down there in that little purple box. Write us a question. Let us know if there's any questions. We got people that'll be watching for that. Steve and Kelly, Samantha, everybody will be looking for those and be able to offer those questions up to us as we go through this. So, Madeline, are you a coffee drinker?
I'm a coffee addict. Yes.
Oh, good. Good. Well, that is just so poignant because I love coffee. First thing in the morning, the very first thing I do, well, not the very first thing, we won't get into that, but my first beverage in the morning is to go in, slip in a K-cup and get McDonald's K-cup, their medium roast. It is the best flavored coffee that I have ever had out of a K machine. So that's my beverage of choice first thing in the morning. And then throughout the day, I'll transition to water and maybe have a cup of coffee later in the day. And I love a cup of coffee in the evening. But then I'll switch off between coffee and Coke Zero throughout the day. Or say I should have said water and Coke Zero throughout the day. But that is my beverage of choice. And unfortunately, I don't have water because I've got a little bit of, I don't have coffee. I've got water because I've got a little bit of a scratchy throat this morning. So bear with me. Every now and then I'm going to have to take a little swig in order to keep things lubricated. But
Oh, you're fine. No, I've heard that McDonald's actually does pretty good coffee. I'm not a McDonald's coffee drinker. I honestly, if my campaign could be sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts,
oh,
that would be one of my biggest pipe dreams.
oh
And
yeah.
where I live in Statesboro, Georgia, I don't know what it is about our Dunkin' in town, but our Dunkin' has always been the best Dunkin' ever. They have the best food, the best tasting coffee, their customer service is the best. And I really just think it's because we're in a small town and it's, you have college kids and the same person that owns it, not their system. But I have to give it to the people who are at our local Dunkin' Donuts. They run a very tight ship in there. So, but that would be my dream come true is if I could get, Dunkin' Donuts to be like, hey, Madeline, we see you exist. A shout out would be
Right.
great.
Yeah, absolutely. And give the address. Where's that located at? The cross streets there for people to be able to go to it when they're in town.
Oh, our Dunkin'. Oh, it's on Fair Road, I think.
Okay.
And yeah, it's I could tell you better if we're in town. Anybody who lives in Statesboro who's here would probably know if I said the Dunkin' in town, they'd know where that is. But it's adjacent to campus on the strip with all the restaurants. It's nestled in between our
Awesome.
cookout and our Arby's.
So I've got a confession about Dunkin' Donuts. My wife every morning, if I beat her to the coffee machine, I'm putting in a K cup of Dunkin' French vanilla. Dunkin' Donut French vanilla K cup for her every single morning. I fix that for her if I can beat her to the coffee machine. This morning was the first morning that in probably a month that she beat me to the coffee machine today. But we're usually up 5:30 every morning and having our coffee and watch a little bit of news before she has to take off and go to work. And I'm the person that gets to stay behind now and be the homebody. So that's my job now is to be. I drive Miss Daisy or Miss Joanne and care for all of her needs. So that is a little bit about me, a little bit more than what you ever wanted to know. So let's talk about Madeline. Madeline you're such a dynamic individual. We've had you on here before. You've talked to us a little bit, but I don't know that we've gone into detail about really your background story that much, your childhood, where you were raised, how you were raised, your youth
Oh yeah.
experiences, whether you were involved in sports, where you went to college, what your field of study was,
Oh
so
yeah.
let's get started about your childhood. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah. Let's start at the beginning. Let's go way back. actually, I don't think
Okay.
I've ever discussed my childhood publicly like this, which I don't mind doing. I don't think anybody's ever asked because it was that ago. So,
Sure.
I was born in 1997 in Savannah, Georgia, is my birthplace, and I was born
Whoa,
July
whoa, whoa,
6th.
whoa. Let's
Yes.
let's 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 talk about that just a little bit. For everybody on here, raise your hand if you just felt really, really old. Come on, let's see those hands come up.
But I will say, for my record, I am the oldest Gen Zer you'll find. I'm the oldest of the old Gen Zs, but we're still babies.
Okay. Please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I had to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. So I was born in Savannah in 97, and I was actually adopted at 2 days old by my parents, who are my mom and dad. And they had actually previously adopted my older half brother 18 months beforehand. So I was a secondary baby that they got. They were called by the adoption agency, "Hey, we have another baby. Do you want it?" They said, "Hell yeah." And me and my half brother were living in Savannah with my adoptive parents for 2 years. And then my dad got a job in Atlanta, and we were there for a little bit. And I think Georgia, that first 2 years in Georgia was between Savannah and Atlanta, and we lived in Peachtree Corners. And yeah, my dad has a background in corporate America, and his family's from Georgia originally. And so that's what got us there. Then, of course, corporate America brought us to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2000, I think, right at yeah, because my brother was turning 2 when we were moving, and I remember he didn't get a second. Oh, I don't remember. I was told, I was an infant then, but we had a huge snowstorm in Georgia in the January of 2000, and he did not get a birthday party because we were moving and there was a snowstorm, and it was a whole drama. But we moved, got there. Charlotte, North Carolina was where I was raised. I lived there for 15 years. And Charlotte life was interesting. I lived inside the city perimeter. And so I lived on the south side of the city, kind of really in the middle, but on the technically the west side, but really just straight down the. I live very close to the little town called Matthews in North Carolina, which is in the city uh, area of Charlotte. And so all through grade school, I was a Girl Scout. I did springboard and platform diving at the age of 8 and did that all the way through school, and actually was on my collegiate team for that sport. And the most interesting thing I think I did as an adolescent was I was an exchange student in Germany for the entire summer in 2014. So that's a little bit of my grade
So,
school background.
so talk just a little bit about your swimming and diving. What was your favorite swimming stroke?
Swimming, I think backstroke because it was the easiest to me. And
There
I'm
you
not built
go.
for
There you go.
stamina.
That
I'm
was
built for
mine.
speed.
Yep, that was
And
mine. I did the backstroke also. Like I said, when I was going to Manhattan, Kansas, back in the 1970s for the state swimming championships, that was backstroke, and I was ranked not real high. I mean, I was ranked number 10 in the state for Kansas, which would be like
yeah,
number 1,000 for the entire United States. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. No,
not
because
much.
my background in swimming specifically is swimming. I did a whole lot of recreationally in high school. I was a lifeguard, and I was also a swim instructor at my YMCA. And that was kind of like my first job. My real first job in life was at 15 and a half. I got certified as a lifeguard and did that all the way through high school. But my sport was springboard diving. And that was, like when you see in the Olympics, the big platforms and the synchronized diving, that's what I did. And I did that in college too for an entire semester and then my diving career ended really because I blew out my knee, and that was very sad.
Ooh,
But
right.
but anyway, I did that, and I did the high diving. I was up on the 10 meter and the 5 meter, and I did springboard, and I had a synchro partner in high school, which was real fun. And I did not make it huge in diving. Don't get me wrong. I was not, nationally ranked or anything, but I went to states. I went to competitions and I did well. And my skill actually really was built in college when I was practicing every single day, multiple times a day, as college
Right.
athletes do. But then that same season, I blew out my knee, and it was downhill. But you know, I was always a big athlete growing up. My main sport was diving, but I spent every single summer doing some sort of outdoor activity. And before I started working as a lifeguard, I would spend most of my summers either on St. Simon's Island and in Darien with my grandparents, my dad's parents, or I would spend my summers off the grid in the mountains of North Carolina with my mom's sister and her husband. And so of the basis of my childhood is, like spending your summers barefoot outside because that's what kids used to do. I mean, kids don't do that anymore,
Yeah,
which is so sad. Like we just don't see kids outside anymore, which is just heartbreaking to me. But I'm old enough to still, remember summers with, barefoot outside with the neighborhood kids, getting somebody's sprinklers going, having water balloon fights and stuff like that. So I had a really great childhood and was raised in a very religiously and politically diverse household. And that is
good.
really what made me, I think, put the tools in my tool belt really to be able to be what I am in life today and do what I'm doing today, is that I can understand pretty much any perspective as long as I can sit down and have a constructive conversation with somebody about what they think and why they think it. So, you know, my
And
parents had a huge
I
pride in
can
doing that.
I can relate totally to your childhood. Especially as a lifeguard, as I was as well. It was such a fun time to be a youth, an older youth, and a young adult at the pool. I did that for several years. I was that typical. I'm going to use a term that you may not remember or may not have ever heard, but I was a copper tone baby, where we
Oh
used
yeah.
copper
Oh
tone
yeah.
all the time, and boy, if my swimsuit ever got drawn down just a little bit, boy, you could just see how white I was because I'm blonde haired, very fair skinned, but I had just the deepest, darkest tan all the time because I was outside just like you are. And I imagine you're the same way. You're with your auburn hair. You probably got fair skin as well, and the
Oh yeah.
number of
I don't
sunburn.
tan though. I burn like a tomato. I have had sun poisoning
Right.
twice in my life, totally by accident.
Hey,
And yeah, it's
yeah.
it's yeah, the Irish background did not do me any favors in the southeast of the United States. But it's fine. We invest in sunscreen yearly, you just got to take care of your skin and make sure you go to the dermatologist and it's all good.
I've had melanoma twice, and they've caught it early both times. And now I'm an avid. I do not get in the sun without a long sleeve shirt on and a something that covers my face. So I've got a big brimmed hat that just like what you're talking about. You just can't take any chances anymore, and melanoma is not something to play with, and that's something that I had to learn the hard way.
Oh yeah,
Wow, that was a
absolutely.
big noise. Sorry about that for getting that ding in the ear. I didn't mean that to happen. I'll shut that off. All
No,
right, let's talk a little bit more about your college. What was your field of study when you were in college?
oh, my college life. Okay, so college is interesting because my original plan for college was to go to North Carolina. That did not happen. That really didn't happen because my junior year of high school, we moved from North Carolina back to Atlanta. And so I graduated high school in North Atlanta at Pope High School. And it was so North Carolina, and not something that I would be able to navigate as a blind college student. Well, at the which probably not that different. However, my friends at my senior year of high school some of them were a year older than me, and a few of my friends ended up going to Georgia Southern for school. And I visited one of my friends while she was a freshman at Southern when I was a senior in school. And that was the only college tour experience, etc. I had. Was I visited my friend one time, experienced Greek row, spent a weekend down in Bullitt County with college students, and decided, hey, I've seen this campus once, I like it, let's go. And at the
Right.
time, my boss actually was also a Georgia Southern alumni. And so she was like, oh, yeah, go to Southern. It's great. I loved it. And so I was like, okay, they have a really great psychology program, which is what I knew I wanted to do. So that's where I went and got into Southern. Did my whole first freshman year as a college athlete. I was on the swim and dive team. And that kind of happened by happenstance. It's kind of a long story. But I studied psychology in school, got my bachelor's degree, and then chose to stay at Georgia Southern for my master's degree. And I got a master's in social science. And so that kind of was a weird situation too, because my original plan for graduate school was to actually go to Europe. I had already applied and gotten into school in Germany. And 3 months before I was supposed to leave, COVID happened. And so I had to quickly readjust what I was doing. I did a graduate program at this from, got in and started classes that fall. And that was, if I had not chosen to do my graduate degree here, I would doing anything that I'm doing right now. I'd probably be in Europe still doing
Right.
absolutely nothing that I'm doing right now. So that's kind of, like up until now, that's what I've been doing. I graduated my master's degree spring. So I've just been out of school for a year. But yeah, it's been a
So
ride.
that was you did get a master's in psychology, is that correct?
No, in social science, and that was focused in sociology.
Social
So
science,
I
I'm
got
sorry.
a
Okay.
bachelor's in psych, and I knew that I did 2 years as a pre-med student thinking I was going to be a psychiatrist, and then I really just didn't have a passion for that. And then I looked into social work and had a very long discussion with my parents about the life of a social worker, and decided to do social science with a focus on sociology and get more into the political science world of things, if that makes sense.
Perfect.
So we've
Yeah,
adjusted
yeah.
a
And
lot.
that makes that even makes more sense that with your advocacy in the Democratic Party and having such, I mean, behind your back, we always have conversations in almost every meeting that I go to. You need to know this lady, Madeline Ryan Smith from Georgia. That's where I start these conversations almost every single time I'm at a Democratic meeting. And I keep telling people, you got to know this, and pardon for me saying this. I'll say it to you and in your, to your face now, but behind your back, I'll say, you got to get to know this girl. She is such a wonderful girl, and she's going to be such a great advocate for the Democratic Party. And she is an up-and-comer. She's just so intelligent. You've got to know this. So that's the reason why, behind your back, if your ears are burning and, just you can't stand it anymore because the ringing in your ears, because people are talking really good things about you out here in Oklahoma.
Oh, I appreciate that a lot. I appreciate that so much. that's
Well, I'm
that's
sorry about,
that's very
the
humbling to hear.
terms that well, I'm sorry about some of the terms that we use. Maybe they're not the most appropriate terms, but the he, she, they, them. I probably should
Oh,
be a
it's
little
okay.
bit more
Girl,
politically
woman,
correct
she,
than that.
her. It's
But
okay. No worries.
yeah,
My dad still refers to me as
so
girl. Hey, girl. So it's okay.
well, and as a father of two daughters, I do the same thing. And I've got one granddaughter and a bunch of grandsons that are coming. So it's going to be a fun dynamic being around the Dawson house. But anyway, you ran for office. We're going to get back to that. Just I want to give everybody kind of a background, because where we're going to go with is we're going to start talking just a little bit more about your participation and your work with the Georgia Democratic Party. That's with that, because I think this is the story that really talks about your foundation. So can you talk to us a little bit about when you started involved, like maybe your first experience being involved with the Georgia Democratic Party?
Ooh, my first, this is probably way back, 2016. Trump's first run for presidential election was what made alarms in my head go off, when like my political alarms, and that before that, my political, that I was paying to the world was probably higher than average for your, you know, everyday white female American citizen that's in high school politics as they're growing up. But being in a household where my mother was a Republican as when I was a kid, and my dad was always a Democrat. My dad's family are staunch Democrats, and my mom's family is mostly Irish Catholic Republican. And that was what was beautiful about my childhood, is that I got both of those influences. I got the best of both of those influences. And so, I can understand my mother's side of our family when they talk about politics, and I understand where they're coming from. And those those family members that I have are some of my most favorite people on this planet. And I would not know what to do with life without them, but they're Republicans. And that kind of is what really made me start to ask questions and talk to people and really understand, like, what is so great about this person ideas. Why do you have so much confidence in him? And those conversations really kind of started with my family, but more started with my peer groups in high school. And in 2016,
Right.
I talked to a lot of my classmates about what they thought about politics. I got really involved in the clubs in my high school, like modern and things that I took a class. I took an elective that had to do with international politics. And one of my, I will never forget this. One of my end of course projects for that class, this was 2016. So I was a senior in high school. I had to do a comparison of two political figures. And I chose to compare and contrast Hitler and Donald Trump. It was a beautiful
Oh, yeah.
presentation. It was a beautiful presentation. And it was based on fact and history, because my grandfather fought in World War II. He was in the Navy and medic on the beaches in World War II. Okay. So like, I know my World War II history. I know who Hitler was. And
Right.
that's what I did for project. And my class, I stood up in front of my class, and pretty much everybody in my group was, accepting it. We were supportive of this. We're accepting this. This is an argument here. This is a reasonable comparison. There was one girl in my class that was a real Trump supporter. She sat through about 3 minutes of me talking, stood up and walked out of the room. I will never forget that.
Right.
I will never forget that. She was dead. And that's fine. It was my project, and I have freedom of speech, etc. in public school. So, that was just a thing. But that interaction, that social interaction there, made me understand the political divide that we were about to embark on. And it made me understand that that moment, politics was going to be something that was not only going to divide me and my friends, but me and my family, which was something that I had never experienced before, because my family is something where, I am not the only person in my family that has been adopted into our family. And my family on both sides, we are very close. We are very, we communicate a lot. We're very honest with each other. We're very open with each other, and nothing could get in between me and my family, especially something like politics. And so Donald Trump becoming scared me when that came out on the news. Because I knew that what was coming down the pipeline was going to be catastrophic for our country. And that is exactly what happened. And so as a high schooler, I knew that we needed, my generation, people my age, needed to step up to the plate. That was also the kind of timeline when I realized that millennials were outnumbering a lot of other blocks. And so I got thrown into demonstration, talking to my friends about why they're voting, where they vote, who they should vote for, and why. If you're not voting for this person, why? Do not pay attention to politics, and a lot of it was kids just not paying attention to what was going on. And so that is really the most of what I do now among our young population, college students, high schoolers, is talking to them about paying attention. because it would shock all of you at the amount of college educated individuals we have in this state and in this country that pay so little attention to politics that they don't even know who their governor is. They do not know who the president of the United States is. I literally talked to somebody last semester who thought Raphael Warnock was the president of the United States.
Right.
Someone in college. So like that
So-
scares me as a person that age. And so, getting into that, I paid attention to a lot of young activists growing up, especially people like Emma Watson is somebody that I look up to, and all the things that she did for the UN and the He for She campaign that she did, feminism and all of that stuff is something that I just kind of threw myself into. And I am a walking daily advocate of that. If somebody brings up that subject, I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to give you my opinion. So that's just kind of what I do on young people now. But yeah.
What I would like for the audience, people in the audience, if you would just raise your hand. When Madeline was talking about in 2016, she had this epiphany of Donald Trump and having really bad things happen. Everybody raise your hand if you had the same kind of epiphany. Just show of hands in the audience. Yeah, exactly. We're seeing that from a lot of people. It's just so amazing. The discussions that I had with people where I worked at during that time, they wanted to see Donald Trump come in and destroy America. That was their intent. They wanted to see him destroy the government so it could be rebuilt, because people felt like government didn't work for them anymore. Well, now we got to see firsthand what it's like to see somebody. When I was a kid growing up during the 1980s as a young adult, there was this whole advertising segment that came out of the Reagan years, and it was about this is your brain on drugs. We got to see firsthand, this is your brain, and this is your brain on Trump, and that mentality that took place throughout our nation over the course of the last 6 years. We're still suffering because of it, and it's going to take generations for us to get over it. But I'm hoping that with people like you, I just have hope. I really do. It's people of my generation that are causing the biggest problems for your generation. And that's what hurts me the most is I have to look retrospectively in the mirror and understand the people that are my peers want to destroy our country and destroy our government. And they don't even care about the consequences. That's the problem that we have. And that's why I get so wrapped up in doing Coffee with Dems. And there's times where I just get so angry because there's some people, and they're not just friends, they're family members. I just can't imagine my brothers and sisters and my in-laws being the way that they are, and the way that they just don't care about America. And it's like they don't care about America because America doesn't care about them, but they want everything given to them that America can provide. And that just blows my mind. I'm sorry about that. We need to get back on focus on and
No, you're
carry
fine.
on with
You're
some
fine.
of your discussions here.
But I will
Because,
say on
yeah,
your point that you just made though, with friends and family and who's the people that we are really, let's be honest, battling against. I mean,
Right.
it's because I kind of experienced that. I had a aunt in my family who was on her county's like board for like Trump 2016 victory. She was working the Republican Party. She was doing poll watching. She was doing the whole thing, and she was involved, right? Which that aunt is someone who I would not be able to live my life without. And
Right.
knowing that we did not agree on these things politically, right? Knowing these things, I to speak about politics when it came up in a very polite, way. and I found that, and this is not the case with everybody, which obviously we can say, I do think that with our family members, especially that we are close to, it is worth having those discussions. It's worth understanding a perspective, because I knew that my aunt, as a United States citizen, as a Republican who is campaigning for Trump, she wanted our country confidently that she loved being an American and she loved our country and she just wanted it to be the best it could possibly be. And her ideas of how to get from point A to point B were just different than mine. And that's really, when it comes down to it, let's forget Donald Trump for a second, forget MAGA. Let's go back to like George
Right.
Bush Republicans, right?
Right.
Republicans
Right.
and Democrats, really, we all agree that we all want to retire on time. We all want to be paid fairly. We all want to be able to raise our kids in a safe area and not have to worry about getting shot when we walk outside. We would like police officers to do their jobs and police communities like they're supposed to. We would like our legislators to do their jobs and vote the way that we tell them to. And we would like our kids to be able to go to public school, eat a hot meal at lunch, and then come home and remember the things that they've learned in class that day. We all want that as Americans.
Right.
But how we get
Right.
there is what we argue about. And so really, if we look at it, if we want to argue between Republicans and Democrats as the words are defined, there's really not a whole lot that's different between the two. However, as we've seen today, the Republican Party has been poisoned from the inside out because people won't stop consuming the Kool-Aid that Donald Trump keeps
Right.
funneling down their throats. And so that's kind of how I look at it, is the Democratic Party has an obligation, not even the Democratic Party, moderates, progressives, people that have common sense have an obligation to do what they can within reasonable ask to aid the Republican Party in getting back to where they need to get, because they are lost. That is my biggest thing,
Right.
is that we don't need to turn our backs on Republicans and even MAGA Republicans. We should not be excluding them and shutting them out and turning them away at the door. We should, if we truly want to say, hey, Democrats are the true Christians, we need to be able to be willing to open up the door and say, hey, we are
And
welcoming
be,
welcoming you here if you can be welcoming and accepting the way that we're being welcoming and accepting to you. That's all that we're asking, really.
exactly.
And, live and let me do me and you do, and keep the governor's office, right? That's all we're really asking. And lack of control, all government, keeping government out of your schools and out of your doctor's offices, that is classically a Republican idea. Small government is classically Republican. I don't know where they lost that. But
Right. Right.
it's like the whole concept of banning abortion and banning books and doing all these things with education, classically anti-Republican. So
Right.
that's where I'm at. And that was a very long
That,
rant. But I just wanted to make the
no,
point that we need to be the party and the movement of acceptance and love, not fighting fire with fire, because that's some of what we're doing right now, and it's not really helpful. So that's all I wanted to say.
sure. Well said. Well said. Steve, you got a question there. I wanted to pull you in.
Well, good morning, Madeline.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, maybe we'll rename Coffee with Democrats to Coffee with Ranting Democrats. I'm up for that.
We got a lot to
Because
rant about, though.
I appreciate your rant, and I'm being facetious, of course. Just wonderful to hear you take your line of thought and you explain it very well in this divide between Democrats and Republicans, and appreciate that so much. And I want to remind everyone, if they like what they're hearing, you've got a beautiful website, Madeline Ryan Smith for Georgia.com, and folks can go there and hit the donate button, of course. And I've got to say, if there's anyone in rural Oklahoma that wants to run for office and they came to me and say, I need a good website to work off of, as a template, I'd say, go to Madeline Ryan Smith for Georgia.com. It's a beautiful website. I love your position statements. They're succinct. They're robust at the same time. And I know you love to talk about, the position points on disabilities, and I go into your link regarding that and the extra information you have, and I'm learning things myself in terms of, honestly, I didn't realize, for instance, if someone with a disability wants to go and work, that they can be paid less than minimum wage, for instance. And I wonder if you would just take the lead on that and and fill us in more regarding disabilities laws and what's not working for people with disabilities.
Oh, God, I could probably write a book series on this. Okay, so disability, well, let's start with what you brought up. Subminimum wage is actually a federal law that goes back to our Fair Labor Act that was signed in 1928, I believe. It's a very, very old piece of legislation, but that's what establishes subminimum wage. And in today's world, you will find that companies, good example of one is Goodwill, for anybody that's curious. Goodwill is not somewhere you should shop. Um, Goodwill, for example, holds something called a 14C certificate, which is something that they have to apply for with the federal government every year. That is their waiver, essentially, to allow them to pay their disabled employees sub-minimum wage. So how that works is, let's say that I'm Madeline, I'm disabled, which is true. I go to Goodwill and say, hey, Goodwill, I would like a job. But because I'm blind, I cannot work the cashier register as well as somebody who is sighted. Therefore, because they have a 14C certificate, they are legally allowed to pay me less than somebody sighted who does that job because they do it more proficiently. With blindness, you do not see that as often. However, you do see this very, very often in the niches of developmentally disabled individuals and intellectual disabilities. So people with Down syndrome, autism, developmental disabilities that want to be employed, they're often being employed less than part-time. So they're working less than 20 hours a week and they're being paid less than minimum wage. So there is a database that if you just Google United States companies 14C certificates, there is a database that you can go and look at this list of everybody in the country that has a 14C certificate. And what's shocking is that not only is it a significant number of nonprofits and places like Goodwill, but it's also institutes of community living and organizations that solely exist to serve the population of disabled Americans. So it's same people that's serving our community that are also paying us a minimum wage. And Goodwill is also one of those companies that our vocational rehabilitation program in Georgia uses for employment training. So yeah, it's just a vicious cycle of just nonsense and poverty. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just one problem that we have in the disabled community. There is a laundry list of things that we could change in America for people with disabilities. And the one piece of legislation that we have that kind of covers what we need is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a federal piece of legislation that all states have to abide by. However, that's the floor. That is the bare minimum that states have to do. And several states have opted, you see in more blue states like California and the West Coast that have opted to have more legislation in addition to the ADA that protect people with disabilities. But places like Georgia lack that and don't really put up extra legislation for people with disabilities in addition to the federal law of the ADA. And the ADA was written in the 90s, and we've only amended it one time in 2010 to add a little clause about service dogs. But aside from that, it was a law that we didn't have to push for because it was blocked in our legislature, but it was something that the disabled community did not originally see that they were part of. It was originally written by a whole bunch of able-bodied men that were sitting in our government. And they just invited people like Judy Heumann, who, if you guys don't know, Judy Heumann died this year, got rights movement. If you don't know who she is, Judy Heumann's life much. The ADA is not a perfect piece of legislation in any sense of the word. If I could rewrite it today, I would. And it would be way better than it is right now. But one thing that we all need to do as far as disability advocacy, which is something that I usually educate on, the first thing that I say to people is, hey, we need to recognize that people with disabilities are the largest minority group we have in the entire country. People with disabilities that are just diagnosed and reported make up 1 in 4 Americans. 25% of our population is disabled in some way. And that's just people who identify and are diagnosed with something. So that doesn't even account for people who have no idea that they have autism, have no idea that they have ADHD, go through their lives technically being disabled, but they don't see themselves that way, so they don't label themselves that way, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's a choice. But the point is that people with disabilities are the majority. And one thing that is guaranteed in life is death. And the only thing that comes before death is disability. So we can either create a world where we are accepting and supportive of people with disabilities, or we don't. And that's a choice. But when you age and become disabled one day and there is no support for you, then you'll understand what it's like to live in the jungle. And that's pretty much where we're at. And if you look at the website and you go onto the page where it talks about disability headline, the subheading, I guess, is Welcome to the Jungle. And that is, me personally, I have picked that Welcome to the Jungle, the song, is like the theme song for people with disabilities in America. Because if you listen and read those lyrics, it's like, yes, we have your disease. We got you. Welcome to the jungle. Let's go. It's a party here, but don't get too comfortable because it's going to bring you down to your knees. And that's literally what life is in America with disability, is that it's constant daily discrimination, prejudice, being kicked down. And then what? We don't have equal pay. We don't have marriage equality. We don't have equal access to employment, healthcare, or education. And then what? We then criminalize people with disabilities, because let's forget that over half of people killed by police are disabled. So yeah, the next time we talk about a civil rights movement, make sure you include disability, please.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Kelly, you've got a question here for Madeline.
I do have a question, but I first wanted to kind of echo what you were saying, Kevin, earlier, about everybody in Oklahoma being excited about Madeline. And that is the same here in Arkansas. We have so many people that are talking about you after listening to you here on Spaces. I want to brag on Madeline as well. I have a disabled daughter, and through talking with Madeline, my daughter's heard the conversations that we've had, and she is getting more active in politics and disability rights, and it's all because of Madeline. So she has lit a fire in a 15-year-old girl here in Arkansas, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see. But Madeline is the chair of the Disability Caucus of Georgia, and I had a question for you, Madeline. What would you love to see happen with disability rights and accommodations, accessibility there in Georgia and nationwide?
Ooh. Okay, I'm going to pick a couple of things. Well, first, if I could change something in our state parties as far as disability advocacy goes, the Republican Party needs a disability caucus. It doesn't exist right now. So I've been doing my absolute best to make our Democratic caucus as welcoming and as nonpartisan as possible, because I want our disabled Republican friends to feel like they have a place to go that has people in their community that they can talk to about politics, because that space does not exist for them in their own party right now. So that's something that I would like to see change. Legislatively, in Georgia, we need waiver funding. We need waiver funding. There is something in Georgia called a comp or a now waiver, where if you have a child or a family member with a developmental or intellectual disability, you can apply for funding, where that will provide in-home health care, a direct support professional. It helps with employment, can help with education, it can help with getting a wheelchair accessible car, it can help with remodeling your home for a wheelchair, it can help with a lot of things. Waivers can go to a lot of things. And we currently in Georgia have a 7,000 person long waiting list for these waivers. And in this past session, we asked the governor for 2,500 waivers, right? We weren't trying to cover the whole list because we knew that that was a big ask. We knew it was a big ask with our $6 billion state surplus. But we asked for half the waiting, or quarter of the waiting list, if you will. He said, okay, 2,500. Nah, let's take 1 0 off the end. We'll give you 250. That's what he did in session. So he looked at that waiting list. He said, yeah, those 7,000 families that are waiting for funding for their children, yeah, they're just going to have to wait just another year, even though they've already been waiting for like 5, 6, 7. Who knows how long they've been waiting? They can wait longer. And so we didn't get our waivers this past session. And we are still not over that. That is a subject that we talk about in every single meeting that I am in as far as disability advocacy in Georgia goes. Waivers and waiver funding gets brought up every single time because that's how desperate we are for it. Aside from Medicare expansion and hospitals closing, we just want our kids, our 12-year-olds, to not have to be in institutions because our government does not provide the funding that they have promised us as people with disabilities, right? And on this subject, since it is May, and I want to bring this up, in Georgia, especially we're doing this campaign, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And in May, we as a disability community in Georgia are really focusing on filicide in Georgia. This is a heavy topic, but for everybody that doesn't know, filicide, the act of a parent taking the life of their child, that happens a lot in the community of disabilities. It happens a lot. Happens more often than we would like to admit. And that filicide happens when we ignore parental mental health and we mental health of families taking care of their family members or children with disabilities. Because I will be the first person to stand up in the room and say, hey, being disabled is expensive. Being disabled is stressful. It's hard. It's not an easy life, and I will never sugarcoat that. But I will say that the government, as an American government, has an obligation to make sure that not only our families, but our children are in safe, loving, and supportive environments. And if their family does not have the financial capability and the resources to manage this, that's what we see happen. We see parents not knowing what else to do. And this situation really came to light, and why Georgia's attention is that we had a parent take the life of his daughter. I believe it was about 6 months ago. It might have been about a year ago, but it was in the state. And a dad had a daughter with a disability, and he took her life and then killed himself. And that is a reality for thousands of families in this country. And that is a reality because their governments do not give them the support that they need. And that is just, again, one issue that we have in the community as far as funding for things goes. And this all happened in a state where we have, again, a $6 billion surplus in our state budget that we just let sit there. And Brian Kemp gets up there and talks about, oh, we're going to raise teacher wages by $2,000 a year. Like that means something to them. So yeah, this is my soapbox and I get very heated about this, but it all really comes down to funding for things. We need to be advocating for things to go into the budget that actually support families and that actually make things easier for people to live their daily lives. And a lot of that honestly comes down to healthcare. Let's be real. Like Georgia, we haven't expanded Medicare, but we also, especially in my area, you are not going to get home health care. If you're sick and you're bedbound or homebound, your doctor's not coming to you. You're sorry, you're out of luck. Hospice and palliative care and how we do that is messed up. That entire system needs to be redone. End of life care, that whole thing. It's just all of it needs to be relooked at, big red button imploded and rebuilt up. Because the issue with America and how we do systems for support with disability is that every single institution, program, whatever that you're going to find that's government funded is funded, ran, and, you know, worked on a daily basis by people who are totally able-bodied. And that is where we find a lot of monetary issues, especially in the state of Georgia. We have a very strong history of fraud in our VR program. And it's not
Right.
because people are applying to Social Security and VR and everything that are just saying, oh, I'm disabled and are really not and are committing that way. That's not what happens. I mean, it does happen, but not at the numbers that people assume. The fraud that happens with disability funding is usually because the people who are employed at those institutions and those organizations are stealing money. So that's what we're battling against now. And we had the opportunity in Georgia this past session to do away with VR and make a commission essentially for the blind to run their VR program themselves that would be overseen by the Georgia Council for the Blind, but that it didn't pass. So we're still stuck having to deal with the nonsense that is vocational rehabilitation in Georgia. And we have thousands of students in this state that get health assistance and have to drop out of school. So, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like I said, I could write a book series about this. And it comes down to being aware of stuff and being educated on things and really paying attention to what's going on in session, but paying attention to the larger disability advocates in the country. I mean, we have a lot of federal organizations that pay attention to disability advocates for you. You don't have to. And, sign up for a newsletter, get it from the White House. They happen. Just educate yourselves on modern disability stuff that's going on.
So for all of the listeners out there who are paying attention, you can see how when I talked earlier about how I meet people in Oklahoma, Calais meets people in Arkansas, how our conversations always, in some respect, come up with, you've got to know Madeline Ryan Smith. You've got to know her because she's such a great person. She's a wealth of information. She's like a walking, talking encyclopedia. When we scheduled this, we scheduled it for just an hour. We could have scheduled this for a week-long series of lectures that could have been labeled the Madeline Ryan series on disability advocacy, and we could have had a morning session and an afternoon session for an entire week and still not touch all of the topics. And Ellen, but before we go, let's kind of lighten the subject up just a little bit.
Oh wait, I do have one announcement real quick before we move on. Just speaking of spaces and doing these more often, me, LA, and our friend Audra actually have Thursday spaces at night, and our night is at 8 o'clock Eastern, and it is on disability and politics. We are focusing on law enforcement this week, so that's what we're talking about tonight. So join us at 8 o'clock. That's all. Thank you.
No, that's perfect. I'm glad you. And what's the name of the space? Go ahead and throw that out there.
Yeah, we have Callie, if you want to put it up in the nest, you can. But it's a separate Twitter account you can follow. It's called Dispolitics Pod, and it's hashtag Dispolitics, like DIS politics. And it's kind of a play on words because it's disability politics, but we're also dissing a lot of people because nobody does disability politics right. So it's kind of funny. But we have a different topic every week, and this week is our second part.
I put that up in the nest.
I want to lighten it up just a little. We need to talk more service partner. What is his or her name? How much did he or she cost, and how long did he or she have to spend in training?
Oh, okay. Dog is a boy. His name is Mercury, and he is the love of my life. He is my partner in crime. I would just know that word, the amount of difference he has made in my life as far as independence and autonomy goes, as just a blind person, because you kind of have, well, you really walk around with a side guide, like someone who's with you all the time. You can walk around with a cane, which is, great, it's fine. Or you can have a guide dog, and that is what I opted to do because I have a cane, but canes are obstacle finders, and then you avoid the obstacles. And guide dogs are obstacle avoiders. So when you have a guide dog, you could walk down a sidewalk with like all kinds of obstacles, and you would have no idea because your guide dog's weaving you in and out. But anyway, so his name is Mercury. He is a yellow Labrador boy. For all of my blind friends in the room, he's about a 75-pound. He's getting a little chunky now, but he's about a 75-pound Labrador, light yellow, almost white. So very light yellow. And he's a big boy. He has a really big head. So, but he is 7 years old. No. Yes. Will he be 7 this year? Yeah, he'll be 7 in August. And I got him July 4th of 2018, which was the year I also turned 21. He was my 21st birthday gift, which was great. And he came from Guiding Eyes for the Blind, which is a guide dog school up in Yorktown Heights, New York. And to me, because he came from that guide school, he cost $0 to me, which is going to be very confusing for people in the room who don't know a lot about service dogs, because that is very lucky. That's not the status quo. Having your service dog come to you completely free of cost is not the normal way people get service dogs. And that often only happens specifically with guide dogs for the blind, because they come from schools that are trained by people that are not blind. And then they're given to blind individuals totally trained. So that is a very specific way to get a guide dog as a blind person specifically. But service dogs in America, you'll have other schools where you'll have to pay tuition, you'll have, trainers that you'll have to pay, things like that. A service dog, if you just wanted to train one for yourself or your disability, no matter what it is, usually the ballpark ticket price is going to be around $60,000 from puppy to fully trained. Yeah, it's the cost of a brand new car. They're expensive, and that's a huge reason why they're not covered by insurance. And it's very, very difficult to do affordably. And then not only, you invest $60,000 into your dog, and then you have a life where you have to pay for your dog, buy dog food every month. You have to buy toys and treats and their kennel and da 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 da. So yeah, having a dog, service dog, is like having a toddler. That's what I tell people, because especially when I got my service dog, I was in college, and I would run into people like, oh my God, I wish I could have my dog come with me. Like, no, you don't want this. It is like having a toddler. And the only reason why it's easy for me is because my 4-legged toddler happens to be trained JT. And listens to my commands. So that's what makes it doable. And but yeah, I walked around with basically a diaper bag all the way through college. So yeah, they're training for a guide dog specifically. Every service dog has a different, timelining, because they're going to be trained for different tasks and stuff. But guide dogs are in training starting at 8 weeks old, just about, and will be done with training 2 years later, usually, depending on what they're doing. So it took Mercury 2 years to get through training, and then me and him trained as a team for about a month up in New York, and then I took him home, totally trained, and he's been with me ever since. So yeah.
Samantha, you had a quick question. We need to wrap this up, but Samantha, I want to give you one opportunity. You had a question.
I really didn't have a question. I just really, at this point, wanted to mirror what Calais and my dad, Kevin, have said today. I am not a young woman. To some people I am, but I am relatively medical opinion education, and your voice is something that I hear when I go into my day-to-day life now. And I just want to encourage you to keep using that voice, because it's really impacting a whole demographic of people who need to hear it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, to sum up our conversation, we really had a lot of discussion. We got into a lot of detail about Madeline's younger life, her college life. We did not get a chance to talk about the roles that she played with the Georgia Democratic Party leading up to the 2020 and 2022 election, or not, and how that's going to make an impact. There's just one question that we did leave off that we needed to get to, because it was something that you brought up, and that was about adoption and MTG's comments about being a natural mother to one of the administration's secretaries, and that was so devastating to hear. And I'm sure that you've got a very pointed opinion about that. I want to give you just a chance to voice your opinion about what she said during the hearings on the Hill.
Oh yeah, no, I as an adopted child, this is the first thing that people will ask me, like, oh, do you ever want to meet your biological parents? Well, no, I have a set of parents. My mom and my dad that adopted me are my mom and my dad. As far as I'm concerned, I am the natural child of my mother and my father that I have today. My mom and my dad that I call on a weekly basis. And something that I have learned and come to appreciate as an adopted child is that no matter how a child comes into your life as a parent, it is possible to love someone else's biological child like they are your own, if not better than the biological parent could have. So the whole natural mother thing, define natural mother. What does that mean? Because to me, that doesn't mean the biological uterus I came out of. My natural mother to me is the woman who raised me. And I, find me someone who can dispel that logic. I mean, my biological mother is a stranger to me. I have no idea who that person is. If they passed me on the street, I wouldn't know. So, yeah, natural mother. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I have a lot of opinions about that woman. I won't say them publicly, but I think we all know. So.
Well, we want to just say it again. You are such a great person. We have just been overwhelmed basically in this conversation with you, because we could just go on and on and on. And in order for, we keep coffee with Democrats down to about an hour. We're a little bit longer than what we normally would go, and we need to close it down for people to go ahead and go through their daily activities. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about the next 2 weeks. I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be celebrating my 40th wedding anniversary with my been together and been through a lot. We're going to take the next 2 weeks off, and we're going to travel out to the Grand Canyon in Utah. And then we'll see everybody back here on May 25th. We're going to be back here with a group that is going to be, they're a transatlantic advocacy group. Their co-founder is going to come on. Martin is going to talk to us about the videos that they're showing that assisting Democrats. And some of these videos are just so overwhelming and heart-wrenching videos. They also do videos to help with, like I said, they're transatlantic. So they do a lot of advocacy for Ukraine and some other European nations, but they've taken it upon themselves to help the Democratic cause in the United States. And they're out of England, out of the United Kingdom. So we're going to have them on for the next 2 weeks. Samantha and Kelly are going to be leading a cause for a women's roundtable to talk just about where to get started. How do we get started? How do we go from 0 to 100 and being a candidate at someday, or where do you go to even form the opinions that you form? And that's kind of the idea that I think, if I'm translating what I'm being told, that's the kind of the area that they're going to go the next 2 weeks, and they're going to be leading that the next 2 weeks on Coffee with Dems. So please come back with us next week, and Kelly and Sam will be leading that cause the next 2, and then the following one we're going to have another group with us. And then I also wanted to announce that it looks like we have a tentative partnership that's coming up with the Oklahoma Democratic Party. And we are working very hard for a possibility of having Beto O'Rourke on our show. And as I find out more information about that, I'll let you know. That may fall apart, may completely go away, but the last I heard is it might be a possibility. So we're looking forward to having that opportunity, even if it's a special activity. So I'm really looking forward to that one. We've had some really fantastic people on this show, from Adam Frisch from Colorado running against Lauren Boebert. We've had Adrian Fontes, the Secretary of State for Arizona, who's been on there. And among those groups of people that are among the top of the people that I feel the best about is Madeline Ryan Smith. She is just one of the most wonderful people. And I'm telling everybody, watch out for and keep track of this young lady, because she is going to be the future of the Democratic Party on a national level. you are going to have to revert back to May the 4th and realize you've heard this conversation here, but this in 20 years, this person will be the leader and somebody that we are going to look up to, and just know that we got to know her in her infancy, but she is such an awesome individual, and we are really for opportunities in the future to with you. As we exit out of here, I'm going to go back and replay our it's kind of the anthem that I've chosen for Coffee with Democrats for right now. I'm just so sick and tired of taking it, and I'm just don't want to take it no more. I want us to be the spear. I want us to be the tip of the spear to take democracy back, and to help people like Madeline have control over their lives and have a fundamental right to having the same things that everybody else has. Just because they have a disability doesn't mean that they should have less than, because they've already got less than. But as a society, we shouldn't give them less. We should give them as much as they can actually take and work with. So here's the anthem that I'm working with anymore. And everybody, please come back and join us Thursday. We're looking forward to it. And again, Madeline, you're awesome. Love you. Look forward to having more conversations in the future. Come back and see us next Thursday. Till then, please be safe.